How are you?
I'm okay. How are you, David?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, where are you based at the minute?
So I'm actually in Detroit, Michigan at the minute. So off in the US. So
Yeah. So, could we do the logistics first? Just could you bring up your presentation, my friend? Cheers.
yep. Hang on.
Yeah.
Perfect. That show up all right?
Yeah, that's it's just taken a second to animate. So just play it there. Yeah. Yeah,
There
it
we
looks
go.
good. Looks good to me. I'll just give you a quick intro and then we can get straight into it. So, David Robertson serves as the Girls Academy Director at Nationals, one of the United States best youth academies. He holds the US Soccer A youth license as well as a selective US Soccer Academy Director's license. So I'm sure you'll agree he's very experienced indeed. His presentation is InStat, a case study in elite youth female development in the US. So over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. And hello to everyone. Looking forward to obviously interacting with all of you. And to give you kind of a brief overview, the youth game in the United States, for those of you here, know it's quite interesting and different. For those of you not familiar with it, so it's very, both the boys and the girls youth games are a bit different than the rest of the world in terms of, for a long time, the youth game here has been focused on the collegiate path. So going to a four-year university, playing there, and then looking to potentially go on to the professional pathway after that. There's been a bit of a paradigm shift now in that, which has been good. Obviously, the US has been very successful on the female side in terms of producing competitive players that are utilize their kind of physical attributes, maybe a little bit more than their technical attributes. But obviously, there's a push to continue to have the physical attributes while incorporating hopefully more aesthetically pleasing style of play as they go through. So that's just a quick background on kind of the US youth market here. So who I am, kind of as the introduction kind of said, I'm originally from, the accent won't tell you it, but originally from Newcastle. My parents are both Scottish, so moved over here actually when I was a teenager, moved to the US in Cincinnati, where I kind of grew up, played, and then ended up running a local club there called the Cincinnati Development Academy, which was the female side of the MLS club FC Cincinnati. So that was kind of my background. Now up here in Detroit, Michigan, running Nationals, which is one of the largest, without a direct first team on the boys or girls side, one of the largest and most successful youth academies on both sides. So to give you kind of a background of the club, for those of you not familiar with it. So for us, in the youth game, obviously here in the US, it's pay to play still, and obviously quite a significant investment for families. So we have to put a pretty heavy value on what a lot of families are looking for. There's different tiers within things. Obviously, ours is geared towards the kind of elite 1%, which is those that are looking to go on to play at the professional level. We actually have 8 youth internationals currently for the US in our system. But we've also got a lot of players who will go on and play at the collegiate level. So it's balancing out all of that because obviously parents are making a significant financial investment by having their children play for us. But our goal ultimately for this program is to produce the highest level of players that can contribute on an international standard while building into our kind of framework and our DNA. So the club is recognized for being a very attack possession oriented brand. So our goal has always been, if you were to walk up to a youth field anywhere and there was no badge on uniforms, you'd be able to identify our club by the style of play and the positional profiles for the players. So we use a decent amount of technology inside of our youth academy, which is something that kind of separates us from a lot of the other places in the United States. So a couple of things that we utilize, VO, so it's an AI technology-based videoing system that we use for all trainings and matches, which allows us to obviously have high definition video without having to rely on volunteers, paid employees, or parents to operate a camera. So while not perfect, it gives us a really good ability to film basically everything that we do, and provide a lot of objective data back to our players. We utilize an application called Soccer Pulse, which is basically your daily wellness survey, which allows us to kind of get a view, and I'll go into that a little bit later, about where players are from a mental, physical standpoint, as well as recovery. That kind of gives us their subjective data, both pre and post sessions and games. And then we use heart rate monitors from Beyond Pulse, which is a kind of a lighter version of what you would get in some of the bigger professional academies. So it allows us to get a good amount of data to compare objective to subjective data and get an idea of where everybody is individually. And then obviously with InStat, it's all of our matches are broken down using the technology, which allows us obviously to take statistical data, to have both how we approach our training sessions, how we have development meetings with our players, and then ultimately how we use that data to push them onto the next level. So I mentioned kind of an attacking style of play. I'll give you just a couple of quick little clips. Hopefully these go through. So this is currently our youngest group when they first kind of came into us. They would be 12 and 13 years old at the minute. So we are the team in white with blue shorts here. And then just an example here of some of our older players playing just in an inter-club training match, just to kind of show again, just very brief clips of what the style of play looks like. You know, we're wanting to play on the front foot, we're wanting to go forward. We do make mistakes because obviously we have younger players. But again, for us, it's very, very principle based, wanting to be able to take our style of play and ingrain it, whether they're 11, 12, 13, which is the youngest ages we work with, or the 17, 18, 19 before they head off towards either professional pathway or the collegiate game. So for us, one of the crucial things is making sure that we hire the right staff. That obviously falls on me ultimately to bring people in that have the same philosophical view of the game, the same kind of development standards, but then also leadership by example. So bringing in people that are willing to do what they're asking their players to do in order to develop themselves on a constant basis, not just as a coach, but obviously as a personal leader. So one of the things we do is we've got a little book group that we do, some of the books that we've read recently. So just creating accountability for the coaching staff, as well as, you know, fostering that always wanting to learn mentality, which is then contagious towards our players. For what we're trying to do, like I said, you know, we're big obviously on developing good footballers, but at the end of the day, we're here to develop the best possible human beings that we can. I know in the previous presentation, there was a bit of a integration in terms of the psychological aspect. You know, we're very conscious of that, especially with young females here in the US, about how we can help them to become the best version of themselves. We utilize a lot of community service programming, working with lower income, working with different types of backgrounds in order to expose these girls to the world around them. But we also feel that it helps create a better training environment for us, and better leadership attributes. So for us, like I mentioned, we want to develop them in terms of three kind of key categories. So as a person, as a player, and then as an athlete. So those involve different aspects, from obviously the psychological to the nutrition to the technical and tactical development, and then physically. So females are often prone to a lot of knee and hip injuries and issues, especially during puberty. So for us to make sure that we are providing appropriate physical training for them, for the youngest stages, you know, in terms of obviously body weight stuff, and then teaching them how to properly be in the gym, how to recover, so that when they move on to the next level, they've got foundations in place that will kind of serve them and give them the best chance to remain injury-free. So into the stuff a little bit that's a little bit more fun to watch and talk about is, you know, obviously how we view the game. We talked about before it being a possession style of football, but a lot of people say that, and it's important for us to show kind of what it actually looks like in terms of how we see it. So for us, it's creating numerical advantages, creating quality superiority, being able to move the ball with a purpose in order to break down the opponent. And for us, that means if it's possible to break the highest line in the first pass, then that's what we look to do. If not, we're moving the football in order to move the opponent. When we don't have the ball, we want to be kind of in a relentless pursuit to win it back, while also developing the players to understand different moments of the game. So when is it on to go and press? What are the triggers for that? How do we create pressure pockets? But then also how, if it's not on to press, how do we drop? How do we create a shape? Because again, with it being a youth component for us, we have to expose them and educate them on both different moments, different understandings, increase their tactical IQ, because ultimately our goal is for them to be in the national team environments, to go on to professional clubs, or to be in the highest level of collegiate football. So every single one of those are going to have different philosophies, different principles, different styles of play. So it's important for us to, while we want to develop our brand, and a lot of clubs come to us in order to bring players in because of that, we want to make sure that our players are not handcuffed, if you will, that this is the only way that they can play. So for us as well, being able to teach the sport is important. Again, understanding your audience, understanding who you're educating. For us, it's primarily 13 to 19-year-old females. So we're going to have a whole different set of backgrounds, a whole different set of, we've got everyone from kids that can't afford their own shoes to kids that get dropped off in a Range Rover. So it's a little bit of everybody across the spectrum. So learning how to deal with them, as well as understanding that you're going to have to treat individuals different based on their situation, all leading to the same goal. But obviously the kid that has nothing is going to need a little bit of a different approach than the kid who has everything and doesn't understand that others don't. For us, technology is a big piece of this, because obviously you want to, when dealing with the youth, you've got to kind of meet them where they are. So obviously cognitively as well, a 13-year-old is going to understand information differently than a 19-year-old. So for us, being able to introduce them, for example, to technology at 13, but not overwhelm them to the point that it takes away from the fun of the game, which is a really important piece, is get them to absolutely love it. Some obviously innately do, others it's more of a process. But we want them to be able to love the game and not be overwhelmed by the other pieces that are involved in kind of elite development. So for us, again, some of this is a little bit repetitive, but want to really emphasize how important it is that we select the right coaches, not just for the football, but for everything else that comes with development. It's crucial that we have the right people, and that's a process. The hiring process is always tough in the US because things are so geographically spread out, that each market will have a handful of the right people, but it's about how you can over time bring in the right people, but then also develop future coaches. So for us, we have a program with our oldest groups where we put them through US Soccer's grassroots coaching education program, and integrate them with our youngest kind of juniors academy. So we are aiming to, if we can't find people that we feel are suitable for the roles, we're looking at trying to develop them for the future. So again, it helps them with their football IQ, but it also gives us the opportunity of 5 to 10 years down the road, we've got players that have come through our system, understand what we're looking for, and then hopefully have a role in coaching either after their playing days are over or while they continue in kind of a part-time capacity. So again, with how we teach, so we kind of use the situational leadership model, which when you really break it down is every moment is different. So there's no kind of universal way to handle a situation. We talked a little bit earlier about it can be done based on whether it's their socioeconomic background, or whether it's just how they are, or again, looking at the data that we have that's kind of subjective from them, whether it's their morning wellness, did they sleep poorly, do they have a lot of stress, do they need an arm around them today, do they need to get hammered a little bit so that they're motivated. All these different things are going to be different, so it's important that a coach understands how to do that, how to be, whether it's introducing principles and it's more of a dictator style, to when we're getting into the mastery stage where it should be more of a supporting style, being able to delegate responsibility to players on the pitch to be able to coach. So our training sessions, I'll show you in just a second here about what we do to break everything down in terms of the style of play of the club and the positional profiles. But our training sessions, we go in 2-week blocks for our development. We've obviously got, like I mentioned, a pretty clear defined style that we want to do, because we feel it ultimately develops the best attacking players. Obviously, defensively, we want our players to be solid, but our focus is on how we can help develop those elite attacking talents. Training, we do what I'm sure most of you are familiar with in regards to game day plus and minus. And then, obviously our training sessions, we try to create everything as much realistic as possible. It's all age dependent. And that means, obviously at the younger ages, it's introducing principles, whereas older is meant for layered and mastery, but also being cognitive of where they are in terms of their mental development. So like we mentioned before, a 13-year-old is only able to take on so much information and so much depth that things have to be taught in a slightly different way. For us as a club, again, one of the really crucial pieces is you don't want it to be a situation where they go from me as a coach, they have me for 2 years, they move on to another coach, and it's almost like starting over in terms of how things are defined. A simple example that often happens is reference to a front foot. For some people, that means the foot furthest from the ball. For some people, that means the foot closest to the ball. So for us, it's really important that, especially with youth, when you ask them if they understand something, 99% of the time, they're going to say yes, even if they have absolutely no clue what you're on about. So it's really important that we do as much as we can to take the kind of question marks out. So being able to use the same coaching language, got a couple of slides here that just kind of, this is how we define it. Doesn't mean that it's right, doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just how we inside of the club are going to talk about these things. So when a coach says this, it means the same to an 11-year-old as it does to a 17-year-old. So those are just a quick couple of examples there. There's about 5 pages worth of them, but didn't want to bore you too much. So onto the actual football and how we kind of define it. So we break things down into 5 moments. I know a lot of people do 4, but we feel that set pieces is a different moment. Everything that we do is broken obviously into in possession and out of possession, as you can see there. So the pillars for us, obviously attacking, defending, transition both ways, and then set pieces within 2 contexts. So I'll slide through these fairly quickly here, but just want to show you how we break it down. So each moment of the game obviously is different inside of each third of the field. So we look at things more if you look at the grid kind of layout, is kind of Guardiola's zones where you've got the half spaces and then you've got more blocks on the outside. So vertical and horizontal integration. So you'll see as we go through this that each moment of the game is broken down into the defensive third, the middle third, and the attacking third. So we have overview principles. So these are the main ones, and then sub principles that basically create a checklist for our players in terms of, this is the moment of the game, this is the area of the field. How do we then, go through these in an order? So I'll slide through these relatively quickly, but also so that you can kind of take a look as we go here. And so, like I said, we teach these in a layered approach. This is not like a document that we send out to the kids and they have to memorize it, because again, it's one thing if a kid can regurgitate information, but the actual application to the game is crucial. So when we introduce principles, we'll talk to them before the session about what we're working on, the intention of it, and then backing it up with video. We try to give them examples of it in the age that they are, whether it's them directly or whether it's another team from the club, because again, seeing our style of play and seeing players that they're familiar with is really important. So we try to show them this is what we're working on, and then we try to show them a example of it at the highest level, whether that in the US is the collegiate game, the national team, or the professional game. If we can, we try to obviously integrate one of our players that's in there, but we want them to be able to see this is it at where you are. So in this stage of your development, and this is what it looks like at the quote unquote final product later on, so that they can understand what we're working on now at 11, 12, 13, how it translates to 17, 18, 19, and then ultimately to, you know, when you're 21, 22, 23. So again, now we're on, you know, obviously set pieces in different zones, attacking, and then obviously how we defend them. There's obviously different senses of urgency as you go through those. And then we have defined roles, and I won't go through these for obviously every single player, but we've got here, for example, your goalkeeper roles when it's different places, setting walls, what to do inside of each third, you know, what your responsibility is, both in terms of leadership as well as with the ball at your feet. For us, again, we talked about we're not the professional part of the game. We're about the development towards that. So for us, we have to provide players the opportunity to learn inside of different moments, different formations. But again, for us, everything is principle based. So when they're in the kind of what we call the final phase, which is 17, 18, 19 with us, we often will have them play 2, 3, 4 formations inside of a game. We want things to really be fluid, so that they recognize as players that this is the moment of the game with this on the line, consequences of your actions either way, good or bad. But how can they fluidly shift? So if we're in a 4-3-3 and one of the attacking mids goes, what does the shape look like behind it? Does it transition into a 4-4-2 box? Well, that might depend on the moment of the game. Are we in the lead? Are we not? Right? What are we trying to get out of the game? What was the objective beforehand? Is it a match that's got ramifications in terms of playoffs, national championship, whatever it might be, positive or negative? So all of those things come into play, and we want them to understand both the value of tactical understanding, but also how the emotional aspect can play into it. And what I mean by that is up 1-0, down 1-0. Like we said, what is on the line for this? Is it a development game? Is it a results-based game? And how those can impact what you're playing in and the decisions that are made from a coaching perspective, as well as obviously a player perspective. So for us, like we mentioned, trying to push players onto the highest possible level. The professional game, especially on the women's side, is an evolving entity within the United States right now at the fully professional level, with the 2 clubs that are coming in this year. There's another one after that. But, you know, 4,000 miles coast to coast. 11 clubs is a very, very small number. There's a lot of semi-professional and amateur clubs, but obviously the goal is fully professional. So technology, for us, stats are great, and they often can back up what you're looking for. But we have to be careful not to get caught too much in the data. For us, it's you can obviously get lost in it, and you can pull out whatever you want to pull out, but we have to use it in kind of a multifaceted way. So one is, are we on track to develop the team and our players how we want to? So we've talked about our style of play, and hopefully this is big enough that you can kind of read without squinting too much. But this is just an example of one of our teams that was an under 17 team last year. So their 2004 birth year girls. So again, we've talked about an attacking style of play. So if we look at just kind of our passing actions there, you can see that we attempted 594 passes in a game compared to our opponent's 284. So you would say, yeah, we're on track with that. So connected 496. So statistically, that looks great. But again, then you have to dive a little bit deeper. So are we trying to do the right things in the right situation? So a lot of that is reviewing film and being able to go, because it would be, if we connected the ball between our center backs under no pressure 300 times, and that's 300 passes that aren't necessarily of value in terms of how they break lines. So when we move forward in terms of sitting players down to look at video, one of the things that we'll do is we'll put values on passes. So a pass that maintains the same zone, but you maintain possession, is worth 1. A pass that breaks a forward line is worth 2, as long as possession is kept. An entry ball into the final third that creates a goal scoring opportunity is worth 3. And then recycling a ball negative in possession is worth 1, so that they can kind of understand the value of the pass in the right situation. Because statistically, a player can say, hey, look, I've got, I complete 95% of my passes. And then you look down and you go, okay, well, the majority of those are connected negative or sideways. So while you're able to keep possession, you don't really help us in terms of what we're trying to do, which is go forward, break lines, and create attacking identities. So again, we use this to kind of verify, are we on the right track? I'll show you a little bit further here about our kind of KPIs that we talk about, both from an individual standpoint, because again, we're in the development phase. So we have to look at, we're not bringing players in to help us win games right now. We're bringing in players to develop, to go and do that for somebody else down the road, either at the professional or the collegiate levels. So how we develop players inside of the identity, how we select them, whether it's when they're first coming to us, when they're 3, 4, 5 years old, about how we help mold them into positional profiles in those foundation stages, and then how we kind of fine tune things as they get older. So, us looking at our outside backs, for example, are a key component of how we play. They tend to get high and wide for us. At times we teach them to be inverted. So the data that correlates with that is different. Obviously, then, we want to look at how many times they've created attacking chances in the final third. Are they doing the right things? So when the winger tucks in, are they creating an overlap? Or when the winger's wide, are they creating an underlap by coming inside to create that numerical advantage that we've talked about before? So the Beyond Pulse app, this just gives you a quick kind of snapshot, shows you, again, this is their subjective data. So they tell us how they feel in those moments, both in terms of the graphic all the way on the right there is individually how the session was, its intensity, and then how they felt they performed on a scale of 1 to 10. So we can kind of get an idea of, again, each individual, who's harder on themselves, who thinks very highly of themselves. And then here a little bit, you can see again, some more, for those of you that have seen the game breakdowns before, InStat's obviously similar to Opta and things like that in terms of you get the statistical data back of everything that you can humanly imagine. So in that graphic to the left there, the top left, if you can see it, is our left back, Ella Offer. So she is one of the top left backs in the country at the 2004 birth year. So you can kind of see where the dots are. Those are where her actions are. So the majority of her actions are in the midfield and the final third. So for us, that again is indicative that she's learning and developing the right things. And then we can go in and look at the success rate of those, were those decisions made correctly. Because while all the data is wonderful, like I said, ultimately for us at the development stage, the eye test is the most important thing of, have they done the right thing in the right moment? The bottom kind of pictures there, that gives us some more information just on their heart rate stuff. So that is, we can take the objective data now, compare it to their subjective opinion of sessions and games. So what was the distance covered? Did we get their heart rates into the right zone? Were they able to actively recover inside of matches? So learning those moments of when they need to calm down in order to be able to play a full 90 minutes, or is there something that we need to work on with them to help them become, a more complete player? So technology. So for us, KPIs, we have those for the team. So what we've done is we've taken when we play with the older groups, what statistics look like in terms of positive results in high pressure situations. So when something's on the line, what are the statistical targets that we tend to meet in order to get to where we need to be in terms of getting our players forward, and what do we need to restrict opponents to doing? And we kind of keep a running tally. This isn't something that we necessarily share with any of the younger players. We start to integrate that when they're in the under 17, under 18 groups, where they're learning more about performance towards winning than they are performance towards development. On the right side is a really good tool by InStat that allows us to compare our players with anyone that's in the InStat database. So we utilize this quite often in terms of giving players a reference point in terms of professionals to go and watch. But also when we talk to professional scouts, national team scouts, and collegiate scouts about, we're able to take our players and correlate them to their players that they feel are impact players. So as there you can see the one on the very left is one of our players, and then there's professional center forwards there as the rest of them. So it allows our players to see where they are. Again, there's things that aren't taken into account by the numbers, which is obviously opponent, which I know was touched on a little bit yesterday or in the earlier presentation. So that is basically it for me. Hopefully, I just went a minute over, it looks like, but yeah. I will.
Thanks, David. I just got one quick question. If you just go into the Q&A, it says you mentioned you conduct long-term potential evaluations of players. What methods or metrics do you use from a physical, technical, psychological perspective?
Yeah, so really good question there. A lot of it is we talk to, when we're bringing them in at the youngest ages where we can mold them for the most part. So we are directly hands-on with them at about 12 years old. So before that, they're in our kind of development academy that's younger, but there's selection criteria. And for us, we don't morph them into, coming in at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, you are going to be a left back. For us, we want to bring in players. Obviously, there's an athletic threshold that's needed for players to make it at the highest level. So being able to categorize players in terms of that and how they might fit into things. So, a kid will come in and we'll look at them and we'll go, okay, this kid could, in our opinion, fit 3 or 4 different positional profiles. So we need to take the next few years to help them understand them, build them towards that, and then we fine tune it a little bit later on. But one of the big pieces that we actually do is interview the parents as they're coming in so that we can kind of understand the psychological makeup of the kid. Again, the US model is a little bit tougher because it's not, football isn't the premier sport in everyone's minds. So we're competing, especially it's leaning more towards, on the girls' side, it is the dominant sport, but we're competing with, basketball and American football on the boys' side for those top level athletes to come in at the youngest ages. So for us, we kind of interview their parents to get an understanding of what the family's like, what their support system's like, and what the kid is going to be like. And ultimately, we do make decisions based on their. We've had multiple players who are very talented, who we've actually removed from the program at 16, 17, 18. Obviously, it hurts us a bit on the field at times, but again, our focus is on how to get them ready for the next level. So if we can give them kind of a harsh lesson at 15, 16, and that changes their mentality and their outlook, and they end up where they need to be, then it's well served.
Thank you, David. We've run out of time, but that was a nice presentation. Thank you very much.